Maybe you recently watched Bridgerton. Maybe you've loved Pride and Prejudice all your life. Maybe you want to join a friend and attend your first convention. Whatever the reason, you are dying to make a costume, but you don't really know where to start? Don't worry, I've got you. Making a costume might seem like a really intimidating project. It might be your first time making something of the sort. You might be changing from one craft to another, or it might be that your most recent project idea is your most intimidating or complex one yet. I've been there. I started making costumes in 2016 when I went to attend my first ever convention. I then just started making them recreationally as I enjoyed the process, and I've made everything from corsets to cosplay to full historical costumes. It's taken me a few years to refine the process, but every time I put in a bit of effort before starting the project, it's always much easier to see it through. Before we get started, just a quick thank you to this video's dedicated sponsor, Notion. In case you're new to Notion, Notion is an online workspace that can help organize and plan just about every aspect of your life. I typically use Notion across many aspects of my life, from my PhD to my sewing to whatever books I'm reading. I've been using Notion since I started my master's degree in 2020, as I found it incredibly helpful to track my studies, and then I adapted it to my sewing projects. It has an amazing versatile set of tools within it, as a sort of Frankenstein combination of a Word application like Google Docs or Word, with spreadsheet and database features, and a reminder and integrated calendar function. By combining all of these features, it keeps everything neatly and easily accessible in one place. You can also use Notion as a team, as it includes lots of great collaboration features. You can use it for group projects, work settings, or even to coordinate that extremely large cosplay or costume group. So today I'll be showing you how you can use it as a tool for costume making too. A big thank you to Notion for sponsoring today's video. If you'd like to get started with Notion, there's a link for you in the description and in the pinned comments. So without further ado, here's my recommended 5 steps to making and finishing a costume. Step 1 and 2, research and design. Whether you want to make something from a TV show, a film, a game, or maybe it just came to you in a dream, doing research is absolutely essential. This will make the actual making and finishing of a costume exponentially more likely. For today, I'll be using 2 examples. One is a cosplay that I'm making for a convention in May, and the other is a historical costume that has been on my to-make list for a long time. My to-make list is kind of endless, and I find that if I don't plan them, I don't make them. So let's start with the cosplay. This is a dress from a recent open-world cozy game with a huge emphasis on dressing up in clothing. A sewist's dream, really. I wanted to make an embellished evening gown for a while, and as the game has become one of my recent obsessions, it was easy to pick a favourite. I picked a beautiful green floral dress, which is part of the game's permanent outfits that you can get. I wanted this to be a recognisable outfit since I'm wearing it to a convention, but Infinity Nikki has so many different outfits, I wanted something that people could actually get and keep. Now, as someone who makes mostly historical dress, I had to do some research on how to make more of a haute couture inspired dress. My first step was to make a page in Notion for my project, with subsections for research, planning and materials. As a highly visual person, I like to customize my Notion pages with cover and icon images and my preferred font combos. This page will be nestled within my sewing projects page, so I also tag with cosplay and in progress. For this costume, it was fairly straightforward. I knew I wanted a couture style evening gown, but I had never made one before. After some initial research, I knew that the type of couture gowns I was thinking of typically had an inner structured bodice, sometimes called a corselet, and that this pattern could be adapted from my usual bodice block. I could then build and drape the rest of the dress over it and cover it in beads and pearls to my heart's content. It was also useful to look up dresses by a known designer with a similar vibe, in my case Elie Saab. For example, from an online magazine article about his atelier, some photos showed details being appliqued onto the dresses, so I decided that was a good way to add the embellishments onto the bodice rather than using the fabric and cutting out the pieces from that fabric. I grabbed screenshots of the dress from the game, and very helpfully, the game already breaks down all the elements of the outfit, so great, thanks Infinity Nikki. For the historical project, it's much more complex. I'm not copying a design exactly, but being inspired by a particular fabric and a more general time period. I have to narrow down on the style first. Ever since seeing the Sargent in Fashion exhibition at the Tate Museum in London last year, my yearning for an 1890s evening gown has intensified. I actually have had fabric in my stash for this project since an impulse purchase back in 2021, but as I mentioned, if I don't plan the project, it doesn't happen. I didn't have anywhere to wear it to, so it has sort of been on the back burner for a long time. But no longer. My first port of call is a general online search for 1890s evening gowns, so I could narrow it on either a silhouette or a year. It became obvious from the dresses I liked that I wanted a later 1890s silhouette with some pleating across the neckline and the swooping train. I picked some of my favourites and put them in my pages so I can keep them all together and better try to visualise the final concept. I'm not much of a drawer, so I like putting together lots of visual sources into a sort of mood board. The advantage of Notion is that I can also put my written research right next to it, so I can put things I grab from, sewing manuals and depictions of fashion plates and actual written text from fashion plates all in the same page. And I think that's it for the design and research for now, so we'll move on to planning. Once we have our projects roughly set out and we're happy with what we want to achieve, we have to plan how to achieve it, or it's more likely it'll never happen. You might feel a temptation to jump straight in and take scissors to whatever fabric you have lying around. But wait, take a second to stop and think about it. Planning your steps will help you stay on track if you have a deadline to meet, and make sure you don't make as many mistakes by forgetting certain costume elements. For example, I've been thinking non-stop about how I'm making my Infinity Nikki dress because I'm so excited about it. But it wasn't until I sat down to actually research and plan it that I remembered there's a bunch of accessories I'll also have to procure or make, and that can add a significant chunk of time and expense to the project. It's not just the dress. So first, take your research and design and break it down into elements. My Infinity Nikki cosplay has a total of 9 items, 6 of which I'm keeping. Why am I discarding a few of the elements? Because they just don't work for me or for my project goals. For example, I'm discarding the earrings as I don't have pierced ears, and making or altering earrings to be magnetic or stick on is more effort than I can be bothered with for the purpose of the earrings. I also don't have the budget to fully invest in shoes specifically for this project, so I'll just wear shoes that look okay. They're mostly hidden by the dress anyway. Making these decisions early on gives you a concrete number of elements to make before your deadline. Even if you don't have a deadline, now you know which elements you should focus on. So making sure that you have a nice, easy collated way to keep track of which elements you need to make and break it down is really useful. So I create a section in my page for each element to estimate what I will need for it and how I will make it, so that I can accurately order materials without fear of running out or overspending on things I won't actually need. I like to have all my materials in hand before I start, so I don't have gaps in the making process, where I'm waiting for materials to arrive and inevitably lose steam. It's about foolproofing. I do very much of the same with my historical project, except that it requires a few different elements. For example, nearly all historical costumes will require the correct underpinnings if you're striving for a period-accurate silhouette. For my 1890s gown, the basics I will need are a chemise, a corset and a petticoat. Additionally, I could also have historical stockings, a corset cover and a small bustle pad to shape the top of the skirt, but I'm not yet sure if I will want or really need these. Typically, you might be able to get away with non-decade specific things. For example, a sturdy Victorian corset could get you across a few decades with some padding. I already have a suitable 1890s corset, but I don't have a suitable chemise. And if you want, you can keep all your elements of historical clothing organized in Notion so that you can pick and choose which elements you already have and which ones you need to make. As a sort of virtual wardrobe. As the dress will have a low neckline, I will need something that can easily be tucked and has basically no visible straps or sleeves in terms of a chemise. This I will have to make. I already have a suitable petticoat, and a while back I tried to make a very simple ruffle duster, so maybe I can simply improve that one I have, even though it didn't turn out very well. Planning ahead like this means that I know exactly all the elements I will need, rather than trying to fit a bodice mock-up and realizing I have no suitable corsets for the time period, and ending up now having to put the bodice on a timeout while I sidestep into making a corset and delaying the whole project by a few weeks. So making sure you keep stock of all your historical makes so that you don't have to double work. So for example, if you forget you already have an 1830s corset, and make another one. So once you've got everything all planned out to your desired level of detail, we can move on to making. One of my favorite aspects about Notion is that it's live across multiple devices. When I'm sewing, I only have one desk and I rarely have the space to have my laptop open. But I do usually have my iPad or my phone in hand, and I can open Notion and quickly add to-do lists or check references, or even more pleasing, check off things from the to-do list. This helps the making process be more streamlined and less faffing around looking for references or details or endless post-its with to-do lists that you've already misplaced. The process of actually making your costume itself will depend on your project. You may need to learn new skills, look up instructions or tutorials, and fix mistakes. For example, for my Infinity Nikki project, this will be my first time building a dress onto an existing structure, the couture-like corselet. I anticipate that this will take me a while to figure out and a lot of hand sewing, so I need to make sure I leave enough time for that. While for my historical project, I'm very familiar with Victorian sewing techniques, so I feel I can confidently step into the making of that and blitz through this sewing project comfortably. Planning is essential in this stage because it means you can flag any new skills that you need to learn, any tutorials or instructions, and you can keep them all collated within your project in Notion. The search function on Notion is also great, which means that if you learned a new skill for a different project, but you need to revisit it, you can just quickly search for flat-felled seams and your notes on that will come up pretty easily. So Notion isn't just helpful for planning, but actually for the making process itself. And the final step is wearing. The last step, of course, is to enjoy your amazing completed costume. This may mean wearing it to an event or a convention, or maybe just for a photo shoot and sharing it online. This can be some of the most satisfying and most rewarding part of the process, if you like seeing the concrete results of your labour. By keeping all of my projects in Notion, I can also have the satisfying feeling of looking back on everything I've made this year in one concrete place. I tend to suffer from the if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. So I actually just forget about all the things I've made unless I can see it very clearly. So keeping all my projects in Notion actually helps me feel accomplished. I also keep track of all the projects that pop into my mind, particularly those I already have fabric stashed for, so that when I finish a project, I can avoid the weeks of drifting around with indecision on what to make next. Yes, I am a Libra. And that is it. I hope this video has helped you think about how to tackle your next project. Thank you again to Notion for sponsoring this video, and don't forget to check it out in the link below. I will see you all very soon, hopefully with one of these projects coming to life.